Sure. I said in my sentence is that La Matematica is a journal that builds a community, a scientific community for all.
Great. Yep. So it sounds like really the theme of La Matematica is an inclusive journal that kind of brings all these various different areas and parts of mathematics and the community together, which is something that makes it very unique. And so I wanted to know kind of what motivated each of you to start this journal and where it got started in the first place. So what motivated the four of you to start the journal for the AWM?
I'll start with that one. So I first got the seed planted by Kristen Lauder, who was then AWM president, and she had been very involved in the Springer series that Mark mentioned, and was very frustrated with a lot of things in the editorial process, and was like, we should have our own journal. What do you think? And somehow, it sort of floundered for a bit, but Mark kept us going, and we kept pursuing. I got Catherine involved. I got Helen Moore involved. Hi, Helen, I know you're here. And we just kept pushing, and eventually this thing came to be. Asked Donatella and Michelle to come on board, and that's what it was required, was a team. So this is something that didn't happen just one person. It was a collaborative effort. What motivated me personally is all the literature and the sense of underrepresentation of all sorts of groups on editorial boards, and knowing that being on an editorial board is really good for people's careers and sort of puts you in the in-group in some sense. And just so we wanted to create a journal where our editorial board, which is many of you here, and thank you so much for agreeing to be on our editorial board, is really cool and looks like what I hope the mathematics community looks like to all of you, and will continue to grow that way. The second reason why I was motivated was there's a kind of culture of opacity in mathematics communication. If it's hard to understand, that means you're really smart, and it's a really tough problem, and that's a cool thing. I don't agree with that philosophy and that part of the math culture. If we want people to love mathematics as I do, and I know everyone would if they only knew, then we need to have communication that people can understand. So at least part of every article, the overview of every article, we hope is understandable and inviting to everyone. So those were my motivations.
Catherine, what about you? Because you kind of were second to kind of come in and join the project.
Amen, as Emil says to everything Amy just said. At the time, for me, there were I was feeling several frustrations. One was I had several women, graduate students or postdocs or early career tenure track people, basically in tears over the referee. My cat has now joined the meeting, we can go. In tears over the review that they'd gotten back on papers. People writing really unnecessary personal attacks, dismissing the work as being, frivolous or unimportant, and often this would be these people's PhD theses that they just spent, 5 years developing. So that was one issue. Another issue was the one that Amy mentioned about editorial boards, the demographic makeup of editorial boards, and the sort of excuses that people give that they just can't find anybody else. So I think that our editorial board says, look at all these amazing people, they are totally findable. Please don't steal our editors, but you can do this too. And the third thing is that as an applied mathematician, I often need to use tools from math. So this is getting at what Amy said about communication, from highly technical, pure math. The opacity that Amy mentioned makes it incredibly difficult to assess whether this tool is going to solve the problem that I want to solve or not. And so just this idea that math becomes richer and the research that we produce becomes more nuanced and connected if we can understand what the other people are saying, was another problem that I wanted to solve.
Yeah, it sounds like, you're all coming from places where you are aware of very specific problems within publishing that you want to solve. And this gives, this journal give that opportunity to kind of solve some of these issues. Yes, Catherine.
And I'll add one more thing. AWM is an incredible organization that does a broad range of things with very little funding. And so having a research journal attached to the AWM name, it just seemed like it was time to highlight the work that we're doing research-wise.
Definitely a great mission there as well. Michelle, what about you? What brought you to be involved?
Yeah, I think I was the last one to come on, and basically I got an email asking me to come on and be a part of it and take over the sort of half of the pure math piece of the editing. And again, just to echo what's been said, I mean, first, I wish Kristen Lauder were here, because I think we're all going to cite sort of conversations with her around the demographic makeup of journals and how important it is to get diverse representation on editorial boards and in places that control funding and sort of at these gatekeeper positions. And so despite kind of the overwhelming sense of how much work this was going to be and what it was going to mean, for me, I felt an obligation to see this through, and really excited about the opportunity for both for me personally, for the AWM, and for the community also. That I think this kind of journal is really important for all the reasons that Amy and Catherine mentioned. And so when asked to kind of jump on and help out and be a part of it, I couldn't say no.
Yeah, makes sense. And what about you, Donatella? How did you come to be involved?
I was at the AWM Research Symposium in 2019, I believe. And that's where Amy and Catherine approached me and asked, talked to me about the project and asked me if I wanted to be involved. And I was immediately enthusiastic about it. First of all, I'm indebted to the AWM for providing a sense of community to me when I didn't feel I belong. And so if the AWM calls, I feel that, one should respond and be involved. It was an honor for me to be approached and be asked to take such an important project. And also, I think that the mission of the journal is extremely important for all of the reasons that have been said before. So I'm not going to repeat whatever has been said already. It was just a great opportunity to address some of the inequalities and the disparities that we've seen, the bias. So I think we've all had experiences when we had papers rejected after maybe a year or more, sitting with the editors with one line, report. And my philosophy in my career has always been that you don't get the right to complain too much if you don't try to solve a problem. And so this seemed the perfect opportunity to try to tackle that and, basically convey my frustrations into something positive.
Definitely a good goal there. And I think if you've all kind of echoed the same sort of mission that La Matematica is meant to set itself apart from other journals in its, in the way that it publishes and its practices, throughout the process. So how would you, describe how La Matematica sets itself apart? How are authors and readers going to see it as different from maybe other general math journals that we're already used to seeing? I think you touched a little bit on this about already with what motivated you to be involved in the project. So how does it kind of set itself apart? Catherine, maybe if you want to start.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of reasons already in the answer to the previous question. A couple of things are pretty unusual in math journals. One is that we're using a doubly anonymous review process, following kind of best practices in unbiased review. And there's been a lot of skepticism from people about whether or not this is possible or appropriate in math. And we'll be tracking this. And so hopefully early 2023, we'll be able to publish a report with some statistics that will let us know if the doubly anonymous review process is doing what we think that it will. Another aspect is a quick review time. So as Donatella mentioned, I mean, I've had papers rejected after 2.5 years. That's 2.5 year review time is just not sustainable for people, especially who are trying to build careers, but also just, by the time you revisit the paper to resubmit it, like you've moved on to several other projects. So we have a two-step review process. When papers are submitted, they're sent out for a quick review, which should take no more than 2 weeks. And that's just like a quick check. It's not a detailed analysis of proof correctness or anything like that. It's just a quick check to see if this is a paper that's appropriate to the journal, so that you don't wait a year to find out you should have submitted somewhere else. And then if the quick review comes back positively, then the paper will be sent out for a more traditional review process. We also are strongly pro interdisciplinary research and collaborative projects. So I'll let other people fill in other things.
Maybe I can add that we require from the authors so that at least part of the article be accessible to a wide audience. So that should foster collaborations and interchange of ideas between different communities. That was a very important feature for us. And another thing that we request of the reviewers instead is that if they reject the paper, they provide the constructive criticism. And so not just, a generic line doesn't meet the standard of the journal or something like that, as it often happens, but something that the authors can build in and improve their paper and resubmit, if not to La Matematica, to another journal, but with stronger chances of the paper having a better outcome.
Yep, sounds good. I want to briefly get to the questions in the chat.
Okay, good. Dumana, do you want to go? Yeah, go ahead. That's what I was going to say too. Do you want to handle the questions then?
Yeah, sure. There's quite a few came in, so I wanted to make sure we kind of got to them. So first is Elizabeth Lowe, who asks, the journal is structured in a very interesting way, which we've covered a little bit. Are authors able to submit to specific board members?
I answered that in chat, so I'll just answer it in voice now. Yeah, so you can pick which one of us you want, and you might get reassigned. But there's a place for comments in the submission site where you can indicate which editor or editors you think would be appropriate for your paper. And I urge you to do this because that actually makes our job a lot easier.
We also have a question from Miranda Lynch. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Donatella.
Yeah, also in the comments, you can indicate if there are reviewers that you think are suitable for the paper. And also we try to honor requests of not sending the paper to some individuals. So we try to accommodate both. Since there are 2 reviewers in general, we try to, if a suggestion is made, to pick one of the reviewers from the suggestions and the other one we pick independently.
Sounds good. So Miranda Lynch wanted to also ask whether you can comment on the journal's position regarding open access.
Maybe Mark could talk about that. There is a plan, right, Mark?
Well, sure, there's more than a plan. I mean, we've got several options in place. I mean, a couple of things I can talk about: open access and open science, we should say as well. One, every author will have a chance to publish their article. This is a hybrid journal. So there will be articles that are both published as a subscription format and as an open access format as well. So authors will have a chance to publish their articles open choice, and they can subsidize and pay an APC to do that. But moreover, currently we now have 15 what we call transformative journal agreements throughout the world, mostly in Europe at this point, but University of California has also engaged with us and have started collaborating with us on a transformative agreement beginning this year. But all of these countries or networks of libraries will subsidize the open access for their institutional members. So we expect to see a lot of open access. Moreover, talking about open science and our prospects for the future. I mean, I think if you don't know this, La Matematica and every Springall journal is outfitted with the service Shared It, which allows anyone who has electronic access to the journal, authors, readers, to share a link for free in-browser reading of any article that they want to share with anyone. And it can be posted on a website as well. So there will be a lot of free access to a lot of content in La Matematica, as well as all Springer Nature journals. You know, we'll, once the journal goes live, as I said, we'll start seeing some articles towards the start of fall. You'll see that every article will have a little shared it link that you'll be able to share with, as I said, friends, colleagues, put it on a social media site if you'd like as well.
Yep, exactly. And as Mark said, that's not just La Matematica, but all of Springer's journals. And so there will be, accessibility to articles for, authors and their networks to be able to share across their networks. So thank you for all of your questions. The next, Kimberly had a couple questions, including what the expected time for submission to feedback on acceptance rejection is. And if an article is accepted, then how long does it take to appear? I think it's a little bit early for us to know what that time is right now, but we have, as Catherine mentioned, the goal is to have kind of a quick turnaround time. I don't know if the four of you have anything to add to what authors can expect in terms of feedback. I think that was kind of covered by Catherine. And in terms of after an article is accepted, how long it takes to appear online, I can answer that a little bit. Our production time is about, I think, 30 days. Mark can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's it. And so authors can expect to receive, a set of proofs, depending on how quickly they respond to those proofs. Then the article, any corrections will be addressed, and the article will publish online first. The final question from Kimberly, what is the level of exposition desired or required in the publication? Any one of you want to take that answer? Yep, Amy.
Yeah, well, we ask that the reviewers to comment on whether the introduction and conclusion are understandable to a general audience. So that's kind of our goal, is not the details maybe, but the overview, the introduction, and then wrapping it up. Can any mathematical person or mathematically, fairly trained person understand it. Because we do want to bridge. Someone else was like, do you look for articles that are maybe the mathematics themselves are not novel, but they have some kind of new connections? Yes, absolutely. That's really a great article.
We will also consider submissions that are survey articles that give, or maybe also articles which describe potential new interesting research areas, but that are not fully developed yet. So we try also to be innovative in that respect. If someone has a vision and has not articulated fully the details, they're still welcome to share that vision through La Matematica. And periodically, we will also have special thematic issues.
Thank you, Donatella, and thank you, Amy. I realized I was also on mute for a second. I wanted to also answer Susanna Fischel's question, which was, is it possible that the journal will earn some money for the AWM? And Amy had answered this question in the chat as well, that we hope that the journal will support some of the AWM infrastructure that always have such a hard time paying for. And if you have anything else maybe to add to that, but I think that answers the question. Yeah, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. We're huge supporters of the AWM. We sent, before the pandemic, we were sponsors of every conference, and we expect to continue to do that as well once we're all back together. And we're really looking forward. We're proud to be, partners for the past 6-7 years already with the AWM, and we look forward to a continued fruitful collaboration.
I'd just like to add a huge thanks to Springer, actually, because starting a journal takes a lot of time and effort, but the journal doesn't bring in revenues for a couple of years. And Springer has very kindly kind of front-loaded some compensation so that we can make this actually happen instead of it being an impossibility. So we really appreciate the flexibility.
You're welcome. Just don't spread that around to the community. I'm joking. Joking.
Too late.
Joking around.
Yeah, so also we have a question from Leigh McHugh saying, she's an engineer here who occasionally hangs with mathematicians. How willing are you to review papers where the math itself is not novel, but the application and its use to support underserved communities is novel? And Michelle, you answered
that. Yeah,
definitely.
So, yeah, so I'll just say, to reiterate what I think Amy said a little while ago, that one of the types of papers we explicitly call for is survey articles on current trends that appeal to a wide range of readers. We would love to have sort of vision articles, like, here's the state of where things are, and here's like some really cool problems. Send us your Hilbert's problems for the new generation. So not everything in the journal needs to be new proofs of theorems. It can be sort of more broadly construed than that. And I think, the brief description of mathematics used in novel ways, especially supporting underserved communities, like, that sounds like a super exciting paper. I would love to handle that and find some reviewers for it. That's exactly the kind of thing that we'd like to see, to kind of think about mathematics broadly construed for this journal.
Definitely. Thanks, Michelle. And thanks, Leigh, for your question. Rhonda Olson wants to know, are you familiar with journals in other disciplines that are similar in design and also have an all-women editorial team, or is this a first? And I think it is one of the first. Catherine?
It's definitely the first in math. I would, so the short answer is we did not do an exhaustive search. I can imagine that like in arts and humanities in specific disciplines, there might be a higher representation of women, but QSide, Quantitative Science Institute, I don't know. Anyway, it's an organization that uses data science for good, basically, and they have a very well-researched article on math journals and editorial representation that shows the extremely low representation of women and of other underrepresented racial and ethnic groups in math editorial boards. So in math, I feel confident saying that we're the first. And I feel largely confident saying that we're the first in like data science / computer science. I don't know if I can go beyond that.
And if I can just tag on to say why that matters. So we spent a lot of time researching kind of equitable practices in publishing, and several of the research articles that we've read have talked about this homophilic interaction of identity of editors and reviewers and acceptance rates. So if the editors are men have higher acceptance rates. If the editors are primarily white, then white researchers have higher acceptance rates. There's nationality, there's just all kinds of strata that you can think about. And if the editors are largely from a sort of common group, then that group is favored in decisions always. And so it really matters to have diversity in the editorial board. So it's not just that our editors-in-chief are all women, but our editorial board across the board is really very diverse along lots of lines. And we strove for that quite purposefully.
Thanks, Michelle, and thanks, Catherine. The next question is from Rodrigo Trevino, asking, should submitted papers be written in a way that hides authorship for the double-blind process? For example, can a paper begin with, this paper is a continuation of our work in so and so and so? And Donatella?
Yeah, we can remove some identifying information, but of course we don't want, and we are not, I don't think it would be ethical for us to touch the content of the paper. So the authors have to help us in the doubly anonymous process and try to avoid reference, extensive reference to previous work or anything that could disclose their identities if they do wish to have their identity be not revealed to the reviewer. So we ask, we can remove the names of the authors, the institutions, the grants information, and we probably asking also acknowledgements to be hidden from the reviewer's view, but we cannot touch the content of the paper. So that's up to the authors to help us in that process.
Yeah, and I think we're not going to outlaw, we're not going to reject a paper just because you said that in the introduction or something, but we would hope that folks would kind of be on board with this idea, right? Let's get on board with this idea that we're going to try to have as impartial a review process as we can. Of course, it's not going to be perfect, and of course, people might guess or figure out, but well, that's no worse than it usually is. You know what I mean? So, yeah, we'll do our best.
And Crystal, I think, put in the comments something about citations. It can be important sometimes also. There are specific ways that you can alter the citations to help preserve anonymity. I can't say that word. So yeah, as much as the author can do to help preserve the anonymous process, we really appreciate. What we can do on our end is pretty limited. And of course, all of that can go back in a final draft, that this is build author's previous work. But as much as you can anonymize the submission for review is really appreciated.
Yep, sounds good. Thank you. And next question is from Arati who says, how is this journal different from other high impact journals? And Michelle, I see you answered it in the comments, so if you could elaborate.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll try not to drag on too long. So I'll just say that we've highlighted many of the ways that it's different. So that the editors in chiefs are all women. The editorial board is incredibly diverse among various lines. We have a commitment to equitable practices in publishing. So what I think I summarized it as is that kind of under the hood, it's very different from any other math journal that you might look at in terms of how we're conceptualizing how we work and what we're trying to do. And in the end, it's going to be a journal of mathematics. So it's going to look, maybe the final product will look similar, although we hope that these efforts that we're making will mean that who's getting published there will be more representative of the mathematics community, and the kinds of mathematics that gets published there maybe will look slightly different. But I think the major differences are in how we've designed things from the ground up.
I agree with everything Michelle just said, and I'll just add that I've noticed there's a tendency in the mathematical community to define math as being like their subject, like the smallest circle that includes their subject area, and everything that anybody else would agree was math. And so another way that we might appear different is, I think that we have a very big circle of math, of our definition of what math is, and you know, referring to Michelle's answer to Lee's question.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle and Catherine, and thanks, Arati, for your question. We also have a question from Miranda Lynch asking whether arrangements are in place for this journal to be indexed via the usual channels, Web of Science, Scopus, etc. And as we all know, this is very important for how the journal will be viewed. I mean, I can answer that question from the publisher side, where we are focused on making sure that La Matematica is eventually indexed in everywhere it should be indexed, including Web of Science. Depending on the service, that can take a couple years. So Web of Science requires several years of publication before they'll consider inclusion of a journal. But of course, that's on all of our minds to make sure that the journal is included in these archiving and indexing services.
Damana, can I just add something really quickly on this? Outside of Web of Science and Scopus, and moreover, probably more importantly in the minds of most people who are attending our panel today, is Math Reviews and MathSciNet. And so we, after a year's worth of publications, will, for any of our newly launched journals, will apply for inclusion in Math Reviews. And so we expect to be included within that year's time in Math Reviews, which should give it, you know, a really a big push right away, as soon as we are, fingers crossed, accepted in Math Reviews. And it's true of the other very important math index, CB Math, as well, which will probably take about a year. But I think before we hit the Web of Science and Scopus, will be in Math Reviews. So all the great content that will be published from La Matematica will be indexed in Math Reviews within a short period of time.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Mark. And thanks, Miranda, for your question. And then your second question was, for those of us working in data-intensive areas, what are the expectations for providing data code scripting?
So I'm in one of those fields, so maybe I'll take a first stab at this. So our goal, one of my application fields is computer vision, which is notorious for having totally unreproducible but stratospherically amazing results. So we definitely want to move away from that model. So we want to really encourage all of our authors who are working in data-driven fields, or computational fields more generally, to have their work be reproducible and to share code and data and things like this. And in fact, Springer will be supporting platforms for maintaining that kind of submission augmentation. That said, we also know that certain people work with data that is not shareable, like health data and things like this. So we don't have a reproducibility requirement, but if a reviewer reads a paper that seems like it should have some reproducibility attached to it, they will encourage the author to provide that material.
Yep. Thanks, Catherine. And just to add kind of the Springer side of this as well, we have kind of a research data policy that applies to La Matematica, but across other Springer journals as well. And this requires a data availability statement from every submitting author. So then you can state whether that data is available for reproducibility, or if it is restricted, like Catherine mentioned, you can state it's available upon request, or it's behind it's not available for so-and-so reason, whether that's copyright or because it's like for health information, as Catherine mentioned. So that will be part of the journal as well. We got a couple questions about how you came to the choice of the title La Matematica. So you want to speak to that a little bit?
Donatella, you haven't spoken, so a lot.
Well, we explored different options, but La Matematica appealed to us because, first of all, it brings us some international flavor and includes different nationalities, and also it's a play on a word that has two meanings, since it's the discipline of mathematics, but also it's a female mathematician, and so this was at least what clicked with me, but maybe others want to give their input on why it resonates with them.
I just love that we in the US, we think of math as being such a male kind of category, whatever that means. And in so many other languages, the word math is gendered female. It's great.
Yeah, we had a list of titles and we settled on this one, and then some of the Springer, whoever you all got to review our proposal, were like, we don't like that name. It sounds like people get it confused with the software. But we stuck to our guns, and I think it's good for the reasons Catherine said, and we put the la in front of it to make sure that people understand it's a noun. And it's not, I know it is also a Spanish word, but this is not the Spanish version. This is the Latin version. Or Donatella probably thinks it's Italian, but that's okay.
We like the title, Amy. We were just afraid Wolfram was going to sue us.
Yep, no, it's a great title. And I think we're all a little bit caught up on the questions right now, but of course, if you come up with any other questions, please put them in the chat. I wanted to also ask you a little bit about, I think this was kind of touched upon already, the goals for adopting equitable practices in STEM publishing. What does this directly mean for authors submitting to La Matematica? Amy, if you want, Donatella, if you want to jump in.
I think we mentioned some of the aspects of what they expect. It's the doubly anonymous, we extensively talked about it, the quick turnaround, we try to remove bias from, some people think that certain areas of mathematics are more important than ones, and we're trying to steer away from that vision. Just an inclusive community where they can see their results being published, different type of results or papers also being considered. Just what we envision is just a great place to exchange good ideas in mathematics.
Yeah, and if I can jump in just to add a couple of other points. So we've talked about lots of the things that we're hoping for and that we're going to strive for in terms of the quick decisions, clear expectations, and constructive reviews. Of course, we're not the reviewers, so we can sort of set those out there, and we hope that that's what we get back from the community. I think one thing that we plan to do is solicit feedback along the way from authors who have submitted to us about their experience, and from our reviewers and from our editors about their experience. And we're not sort of setting processes that will never change. We're trying to be flexible and adaptable to the community and to serve the community the best way we can and the best way we know how. So we've started from a research base to build our processes, but we're hoping that you know, if we find things aren't working, we're going to change them. We're not sort of fixed in our mindset. We're hoping to learn and grow.
Yeah, I want to just underline what Michelle just said, because I had it in my notes to be sure to say this. All of you here are part of the process, right? And it is really a process. So keep telling us what you think and help us make this what we want it to be. Thank you.
And I'll
And
just add
please-
that sorry, go ahead.
And please submit your work to La Matematica. The only way for this journal to achieve what we aspire to do is if the scientific community, the mathematical community, is receptive to what we are doing and that sustain us in our efforts. Without contributions to the journal will cease to exist or not be relevant. And so that's why we are trying to promote it as much as we can, and do the same, please. Spread the word around. If you think this is the right place for you to submit, maybe some other people who are not aware of the existence of the journal may find it a good avenue for their work as well.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
Also, Tamara, I'm sorry, if I can just interrupt a second. I believe we have a couple more questions in the chat that Damana, you tackle that. But a quick thing, if people have other questions, you don't necessarily just have to use the chat for that. You can raise your hand and we'll get to you, and you can, you know, do this through the spoken word as well.
I just wanted to add one thing to this conversation, which is that this could have come up in other parts of the conversation, but we're really focused on clear communication and transparency. So regular communication between authors and reviewers and editors during the review process, but also related to this conversation, communication back to the community about how we're doing, what's working and what isn't. So this isn't like this feedback that we were talking about isn't just some secret thing that we're holding to ourselves and like fidgeting with the controls. We're going to be communicating this back to you so that we're kind of all on the same page about what's working and what isn't.
So along that same line and along that same topic, because we're of course encouraging everyone to submit to the journal and submit their research, what makes a good submission? What are you looking for in a good submission? Amy, if you want to start, maybe.
You're muted.
Okay. Yeah, let me just get. So what makes a good submission? It should be, so like we said before, the overview should be understandable and engaging. So it should be something the author is excited about writing about, and so about sharing. So tell us why. There should be a clear exposition of results. So in other words, while we hope to give supportive reviews, we don't want submissions that are like, here's a draft, give me some feedback so I can make it better. So, kind of finished exposition of your results. Another positive thing would be to make connections between fields, leave the reader wondering, oh, what would happen if XYZ? if so lots of discoveries, right, are made through cross-pollination, and that can only happen if we can communicate what we're doing to people outside our immediate subfield. So that's kind of a theme you've been hearing today. And so those few things I think make a great submission.
Are you looking for a particular length of article, as Joanna asks?
I
Nope.
was just starting to type a response to that, so maybe I'll take that. So I'll say, because we're an online journal, we have a great deal of flexibility in terms of the length of the articles, but just, I mean, one thing to, of course, be aware of, put yourself in the reviewer's shoes. If your paper is 100 pages, we may not get that quick turnaround that we're striving for on super lengthy, super complicated papers. It may take us some time to find reviewers who have the time and energy to review something like that, and then to sort of do a detailed evaluation of it. So that's the only thing to be aware of, but we don't have any page limits, either lower or upper. You know, I've read really great, 5-page papers in journals, and I've spent months reading really long papers, and both of those have a home.
Thanks, Michelle. And thanks, Joanna, for your question. We are reaching kind of the end of time.
Can I just, Damona, can I jump in? Because there was
sure.
one, Miranda asked about becoming a reviewer. And so in addition to folks who, we want you to submit your articles, if you're interested in reviewing for us, that is awesome. So I just said, contact one of the 4 of us, or an editor or someone on the editorial board, and they can add you to the database. We just kind of want to know what your expertise is, what kinds of papers you're interested in handling, and we can add you to our list of reviewers that we may tap in the future. So I really appreciate that question. That it's always awesome to have people volunteer to help. So yeah, please do that.
Can I just say one thing? I'm going to put in the chat the link to submitting to the journal as well, since we are talking about submissions. So here it is. If you want to got something in mind right away, you can sort of cut and paste that link and start the process. I think Arati has a question, Damona.
Yeah, so I see her hand is raised. Arati, go ahead.
Thank you. So I'm just wondering, is it free to publish or we have to pay something?
It's free to publish. Yep. It's normal subscription-based journal, but we do have the option for open access. So if you choose to publish your individual article as open access, then there would be an article processing charge. However, kind of Mark covered this a little bit earlier, that we have deals with various countries and institutions, including the University of California, where it's free to the author to publish open access as part of the deal. So that's also an option.
Thank you.
Yeah, but Arati, to completely answer your question, there are absolutely no page charges at all. So, right, if you're used to that historically, absolutely no page charges.
So somebody should not be the AWM member also to be an author. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely not. Open to everybody in the world.
But you all should be AWM members as a separate issue.
That as well. Yeah, and Miranda asked when the first issue will appear. And if submissions are currently being accepted. So absolutely, submissions are being currently accepted. And the first issue is scheduled for January 2022. When I think there will be another party planned in celebration of that first issue. But yeah, I know we're reaching the end of time. Oh, and Elizabeth also wanted to ask whether this would be continuous article publishing or if it would be kind of online first. And I think we ended up with that there would be kind of an online first and a curated issue. So look forward to that as well. Okay, so in the last minute, before we all head out, I wanted to ask you one last question. If there is a final thought that you have that you want to leave everyone here with, something final about what readers and future authors should remember about La Matematica.
My final thoughts are, this is not a journal just for women. It's not just for women, but it's a supportive process and it's your journal. So work with us.
Sounds good.
I'm just gonna
Michelle?
say, just because you were just talking about the first issue, so maybe I'll just give a plug that this is the 50th anniversary of the AWM this year, and the first issue is, as Dimana mentioned, a curated issue where we solicited articles from past presidents, prize winners, folks who have been really a major part of the AWM over the past 50 years, and I'm really excited about that first journal and tying the launch of this journal to a major milestone for the AWM.
And Catherine?
Yeah, thanks, Michelle, for describing that. I'll just add that in my mind, this journal is all about inspiration. It's about inspiring people to come together as a community, inspiring people to do better by their fellow mathematicians, inspiring new research connections, inspiring new collaborations. So inspiration is really my one-word summary of this journal.
And
Thanks,
to
Catherine.
celebrate the launch of the journal, we're also organizing a special session at the joint meetings in 2022. So we hope to see you there. And if you have questions about the journal or comments, feedback, please get in touch with us. Our emails are on the webpage, and we'd love to hear from the community.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming. We're at the end of time, but this was a really great conversation. Thank you, Michelle, Amy, Catherine, and Donatella, for your time and for answering everyone's questions about the journal. And thank you to everyone for coming and for being part of this conversation. And Mark, you have a final
no, I
thought?
just wanted to say thank you as well. And so this was really great.
Yeah. Thank you, and look out for the first issue. Submit, of course, to the journal. Yeah, have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thank you.